We are now recording, Nikesh.
Nikesh, you're muted.
And you would think that I would know better. This happened last time. It is seriously deja vu. But with that, welcome everyone to the meeting of the Cannabis Oversight Committee. As my colleague Jeremy Schwartz mentioned a moment ago, this meeting is being recorded, as are all meetings. You can find a copy of this meeting on the Office of Cannabis website, probably by tomorrow or the day after. Please take a look there if you would like any of this content. Because this meeting is being recorded, please keep that in mind. And with that, I will turn it over to Chair Jamalian.
Thanks, Nikesh. Welcome, everybody. It's been a minute since we last met. There's been a lot of developments in our industry at City Hall, and I'm hoping that today's presentation will get everybody up to date so that in our next meeting, we can make some specific recommendations, which is obviously the goal of our committee. The next meeting will feature a substantial portion around the grant disbursement, in addition to fulfilling our objectives in regard to improving tax legislature and other ordinances and codes that were mostly predicated on some legacy market information and outdated data. Therefore, we've invited the City Controller's Office today to give us an update on the status of their report assessing the impact of a local cannabis tax. That will be followed up by the Permit Center, which is essentially the new location for building permits. And as you all remember, we did have an in-depth presentation from Jeff Buckley last time, and I'm hoping that some of the issues raised then will be addressed today, such as paper versus EPR submissions, and if there's been any progress in getting a dedicated cannabis plan checker or permit agent that can mitigate these building permit slowdowns, which are just not sustainable for our industry. Last but not least, I thought the OOC could give us an update 6 months into Director Patel's tenure, as this transition phase is now kind of coming to an end. And I'm sure that you've all seen new faces and have communication with new emails. And today is a really good opportunity to see what the OOC has been up to and where they are going in the next 6 months. That's pretty much it. In addition, I wanted to congratulate Sarah Payan for her appointment to the State Cannabis Advisory Board. Before we get to the agenda, we obviously have our beloved housekeeping. So public comment for the members of the public. Remember, your comment should be addressed to the actual agenda point. There is a general public comment section in the end if you want to make a general comment. Jeremy or a member from RDA will give you the instructions on how to dial in and how to make your comment. Just note that our committee cannot respond to your comments, but we will put them on record. That being said, I think we can go to agenda item number 1, which would be roll call, correct?
That is correct, Chair Jamalian. And with that, Sarah, if you wouldn't mind taking roll call.
Certainly. We'll now begin with non-voting members. So seat number 1, do we have a representative from the Department of Public Health, Mohanad Malhi, or someone?
Sarah, I do not see member Molly here today, but I did speak with him yesterday, and it is my understanding that he will join. So if he joins at a later point, we can certainly correct the roster.
Okay.
And that's true of everyone else as well.
All right. Seat number 2, a representative from the Police Department. Do we have Captain Brian Philpott or Sergeant Chris Oshida? For seat number 3, do we have a representative from the Department of Building Inspection?
Yes, we do. This is Joey Chung with DBI.
Thank you, Jimmy. Seat number 4, do we have a representative from the Planning Department?
And Sarah, the representative is Michael Christensen. He messaged me a little while ago saying that he'll be about 30 minutes late, but he will be here.
Okay. Seat number 5, do we have a representative from the San Francisco Unified School District, Quarry Park, or another rep? Rosalia Lopez, Quarry Park. Seat number 6, do we have a representative from the Entertainment Commission?
Sir, Dylan Rice is typically the representative, and he has another commitment, so he will not be attending today.
Okay. And seat number 7, do we have a representative from the Fire Department, Chad Law or Victor Wong?
Hi, Victor Wong here, Inspector Wong.
We'll now proceed with the voting members. Seat 8, Chair Jamalian.
Present.
Seat 9, Aaron Flynn.
He's not present.
Seat 10, Ryan McGilly.
Present.
Seat 11, Doug Block.
Present.
Seat 12, Sean Richards. Absent. Seat 13, Nina Parks.
Present.
Seat 14, Brendan Hallinan.
Present.
Seat 15, Teresa Foglio Ramirez. Not present. And seat 16, Sarah Payan.
Present.
All right. With that, we have established a quorum.
Thank you, Sarah. Then we can move on to agenda item number 2, which is review and adopt the resolutions to allow us to have these virtual meetings. I don't think it'll take too long, but let's take a minute. And then if any member wants to make a motion to adopt, please go ahead. That will save us some time.
I motion to adopt those amendments.
Second.
Chair Jamalian, prior to being able to take a vote, we'd have to open up for public comment.
Sure. For this agenda item, just to be clear to the public.
That's right.
Chair Jamalian, do you prefer 2 or 3 minutes for public comment?
2 minutes would be great. Thanks, Jeremy.
At this time, public comment is open. There are 2 ways to submit public comment. Option 1, by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484-709-5055 and press *3. Option 2 to submit public comment is via the chat box on the WebEx platform. At this time, I do not see a caller, and I will check the chat box. I do not see a chat box comments in the chat box either.
Great. If Member Parks doesn't mind making the motion again, so we can move on.
I motion for us to approve those amendments.
Second. Thank you, Nina. Can we take a vote on that motion, Sarah?
Yes. All right. Seat 8, Chair Jamalian, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 9, Aaron Flynn. Not present. Seat 10, Ryan McGilly, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 11, Doug Block, how do you vote? Present. Seat 12, Sean Richards. Not present. Seat 13, Nina Parks, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 14, Brendan Hallinan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 15, Teresa Foglio Ramirez, not present. Seat 16, Sarah Payan, how do you vote?
Aye.
The motion passes with 6 ayes.
Thank you, Sarah. The next item is the reviewing the minutes of the last meeting. And while this is usually a bit of a housekeeping item, I would really like you guys to take a little bit of time with section 5, because the permit department will be here today and making a presentation. And I think some of the issues have already been raised in the last meeting. So if there's anything that you as a committee member would like to follow up on, section 5 is where I would ask you to read a little more thoroughly. But let's take a minute to review these minutes and then reconvene for public comment.
And Jeremy, if you wouldn't mind sharing the share feature with Sarah, she can go ahead and share her screen with a copy of those minutes for public viewing.
Will do. For Sarah Farrell.
That's right.
I got a little confused earlier too, Jeremy.
That's fair. Sarah Farrell.
So did I. I thought I was running a meeting for a moment there.
Sarah, I wouldn't do that.
Without a
Sarah-
warning, Sarah, just hey, here you go.
Ms. Sarah
I do
Farrell,
think
you're
on my
now able to
feet.
share.
All right, here are the agenda item number 4, the previous meeting minutes.
Yeah, permit processing right there. That's kind of where I would, that was a pretty lengthy point and part of the committee discussion. So I just wanted everybody to really refresh their memories on that one. The two main points that we identified that seem to be a real bottleneck were ticket delays and electronic plan review. So those are something that I would probably follow up with DBI on. And I saw that during the committee discussion, Member Hallinan also had some points, especially in regards to establishing sort of one person to work with. So just to name two. I think we can also open up for public comment at this point, Jeremy.
Will do, Chair Jamalian. Public comment is now open. There are two ways to submit a public comment. Option 1 by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484-709-5055 and press *3. Option 2 is via chat box on the WebEx platform.
Thank you.
At this time, I am seeing neither a comment on the chat nor Collins.
Great.
Public comment is now closed.
Then I would open up the floor to the committee. If there's any comments, points, edits, please feel free to chime in here. Great. In that case, do we want to make a motion to adapt the minutes as they are?
Is Jeff Buckley here today? I missed it. Sorry. No?
I do not believe Jeff is here today.
We do have DBI present today, though, right?
Yes, this is Jimmy Chung with the Department of Building Inspection.
Right.
Jimmy
Thank
Chung.
you, Jimmy.
I'm happy to make the motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Sarah, could we have a vote on that motion?
Yes. Seat 1, Chair Jamalian, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 2, Aaron Flynn. Seat 3, Ryan McGilly, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 4, Doug Block, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 5, Sean Richards, how do you vote? Seat 6, Nina Parks, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 7, Brendan Hallinan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 8, Teresa Faglio Ramirez is not here. Seat 9, Sarah Payan, how do you vote?
Aye.
The motion passes with 6 ayes and 0 nays.
Thank you. That means we can move on to agenda item number 3, which is the review and consideration of today's agenda. So please take a minute to do that, and then we'll open up for public comment before we make a motion to adopt it.
Sorry, Chair Jamalian, did you say open public comment?
Well, for agenda item number 3, I guess I just went in a different order. Sorry. Yes, agenda item number 3, which I just made for number 3, but we still have to adopt today's agenda, correct?
That's correct.
So yeah, we can open that for public comment.
Will do. I'm toggling the settings. Go. Public comment is now open. There are 2 ways to submit public comment. Option 1 by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484-709-5055 and press *3. Option 2 to submit public comment by chat box on the WebEx platform. There are no public comments in the call queue nor on the chat. Public comment is now closed.
Thank you. And then if we can adopt today's agenda so we can move on with the controller's office report, that would be great.
To approve.
Second.
Chair Hallinan.
All right. As we're voting on the motion to approve today's agenda, seat 1, Chair Jamalian, how do you vote?
Aye.
Chair 2, Aaron Flynn is not present. Seat 3, Ryan McGilly, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 4, Doug Block, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 5, Sean Richards, not here. Seat 6, Nina Parks, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 7, Brendan Hallinan, how do you vote?
Aye.
Seat 8, Teresa Foglio Ramirez is not here. Seat 9, Sarah Payan, how do you vote?
Aye.
The motion passes with 6 ayes and 0 nays.
Thank you, Sarah. That way, moving on to agenda item number 5, which is the Controller's Office report. This is in light of the fact that we had suspended the gross receipt taxes on cannabis, and this suspension is coming to an end. And Supervisor Mendelman's office has been really helpful trying to establish contact between myself and the Controller's office to see if the study has been done on the impact of a local cannabis tax. So we haven't seen anything yet. So we wanted to give the Controller's office a chance in today's meeting to give us an update what the status is with this assessment, with this analysis. Again, in light of our next meeting, we need as much information as we possibly can get to make strong recommendations and also well-worded ones. So with that being said, I would like to pass it on to a representative of the City Controller's Office. Thank you for coming in today. We look forward to hearing what you're presenting.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm planning to be super brief. My name is Carol Liu. I am Citywide Revenue Manager in the Controller's Office Budget and Analysis Division. Our group is primarily responsible for the technical development of the city's budget, as well as pieces of the budget that are citywide in nature, including salaries and benefits costs, tax revenues, such as the cannabis tax, charter mandated spending, and reserves. So as was mentioned, we got the request from the Board of Supervisors late last year to review the most recent data in the city's cannabis market, and we're aiming to summarize this information in a brief report coming out this fall. What we've done so far is to do an initial gathering of data this spring, and we're reviewing and updating that information right now. So I don't have anything specific to share today, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about the process that we've gone through so far. So the initial gathering of information was done through a graduate student researcher who we hired for the spring semester. And they conducted a research in a number of areas, including reviewing legislation and tax changes from other municipalities, reviewing kind of the state context and the legislative landscape, conducting academic literature reviews, and then they also conducted 15 interviews, some with background information, some with local industry, some academics, and then as well as talking to peer cities. As I mentioned, right now, we're in the process of reviewing all of this information that has been collected, and we're trying to distill it down. In addition, as everybody here knows, there have been, our intern was here this spring, but since then there have been changes at the state level to the cannabis tax that weren't included in the initial fact findings, so we need to incorporate that information as well. So we anticipate to have a brief report out this fall, but as I mentioned, I don't have anything to share at this moment. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
This is Brendan Hallinan. So is there someone else that's been assigned to work on it since I guess the intern is no longer there, or are you guys still finding the right person to kind of pick up the project and finish it off by the fall, because fall's right around the corner?
Fall is right around the corner. So it just goes back to our group. So our group is going to finish it up. Staff in the Controller's Office.
Okay, great.
This is Doug Block. I have a question. I appreciate the complexity of the research, and I'm glad you're looking at what's happening at the state level. And I want to flag something and then ask a question. And just to flag that our people in Sacramento have, to the extent we've been involved in negotiations around tax policy, obviously we've been working closely with our partners at the UFCW, but we've also been working with the public employee unions, in particular SEIU, because they are as representing public servants, they're very concerned about the overall tax and revenue picture in the state. And so I'm just wondering, is your report going to also flag things like how does this fit into the overall city budget and what is funded through the revenues that are collected, or what is supposed to be if the tax policy was actually working?
I think we're definitely, in terms of the state, I don't think we'll be talking about the state's own tax and revenue picture in terms of like their budget, but we will be commenting about the impact of changing the excise tax up or down to the city's budget and what is assumed in the city's budget. So we'll touch on that.
Okay, yeah, that's thank you. I guess I wasn't clear. I was only giving the state as an example and hoping that yes, indeed, we would be looking at the picture of how this fits into the city budget. So thank you.
So you are looking at the impact that the new cannabis tax has on the city's budget through the disbursements that are made from the state down to the city. But are you also looking on the impact of a potential local sales tax and how that would impact operators?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, that's what I meant. That's what we're focusing on, is on the impact of the local tax or imposition of the local tax on operators versus the impact of the state and how it flows into the city's budget. So that part, I'm sorry if I was confusing. That part we are not planning on focusing on. We're focusing on the local excise tax,
Right.
but placing it within the greater context of there's also state tax.
Yeah, because I mean the changes that the recent tax, relief was minimal. It was really just a shift of a tax to another, the liability was shifted to the retailers. I think the impact even of the cultivation tax elimination is ultimately less than 1%. So I think we can do better than that. And these measures should be really impactful, not just, symbolic. So that was kind of the reason we were hoping to get a little more out of your office, to be honest, because to Member Hallinan's point, Prop D is also coming up in fall. There's a lot of legislation coming up, and the more data we can get, the sooner, the better it would be for our industry, which is also the reason we've been actively reaching out to your office. So it'd be nice if you could work more closely with this committee and get some, maybe more than 15 use cases from the city. We have, I think, close to 60, 70 operators. Be good to have a data set that includes more than 15 interviewees. I think so. Please, anybody else that has more experience in research, chime in here. But that would be really great. That would be, I think, would yield to better data and essentially probably a more reasonable tax rate.
Definitely. If I can chime in as well, this is Nina Parks. I would really love to also see some data set in regards to what the cost of living is in San Francisco in comparison to other places in California, especially because that 15% excise tax, which is placed on the consumer, right, has actually been really, really difficult for us as operators in being able to compete with the traditional marketplace, right? Because California had promised a tax structure that would be competitive or would encourage people from the traditional market to be able to cross over, but with 15% tax, it has not actually yielded that result. So for us in San Francisco, considering what the cost of living is, as well as the impacts of the 15% tax on our consumer base, and like what can actually encourage them to come over and get tested clean cannabis from our operators versus going towards the traditional market, that would be a very helpful data set for us to look at as well.
Yeah, and to add to your point, Nina, I think we would also like the consideration of people evading taxes and our social equity program? Is the city controller's office looking at the amount of delivery services that are operating out of a nearby county with favorable tax rates, making deliveries in the city, essentially evading our social equity program? Are you looking at the impact of that? I think it's to the tune of about 25 million. I think Member Hallinan has a little bit more information on that. But that's another thing we should really consider. And to add to Nina's point about cost of living, also the cost of doing business in San Francisco. We can't compare the San Francisco dispensary even to a sister twin city of Sacramento. It's a completely different structure of cost structure for a business owner, right? So that should also be taken into account. And I'm sure you do that, but that's something I'd like to flag.
I'd like to piggyback off of what Chair Jamalian said, also taking into consideration that the industry wishes to be treated as a business as any other, and we have a high vacancy rate that was even prior to the pandemic. And if you look downtown, it's a ghost town. With the high cost of entering the market, much less sustaining a footprint in the market, I really hope that that's being taken into consideration, because when these businesses close, it impacts the community because we are employing locals as well.
Brendan, can you add to the delivery service issue?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the city, I would probably I don't know if that was covered by later in our agenda. We were talking about potentially about enforcement a little bit. But I think that's something that's really nebulous. How much out of city activities taking place, how much unregulated activities taking place. How many businesses are evading local taxes as well as social equity program. I don't know. I mean, that issue itself would be really interesting to dig into, and that may be beyond the scope of this study. But I think that's something that the city, whether it's this department or another, should start looking into and figure out what sort of resources we have at our disposal to curtail it and what the fiscal impact is of it. I mean, obviously our program is expensive to operate, I'm sure. I'm not sure if that's going to be part of, the costs associated with this program is going to be part of the study as well. But I think, obviously it's expensive for our own bit to run our businesses, but it's also expensive for the city to set up and run this program. So trying to figure out, I've had some preliminary conversations with the city attorney's office about this. And I'd like to hear from the OOC a little bit about it as well at some point. I don't know if it would be today or something for a future agenda, but I mean, that's the elephant in the room that in the state of California, but also in San Francisco, where we have, a very heavy regulated industry and massive barriers to entry, for compliant businesses. So I don't have the answers. I mean, I could speculate, but there's no point in doing that. I think it's just something that we should probably talk about how we're gonna address going forward.
Yeah, to your point, that's a whole agenda item on its own, and it should be under the enforcement item. So we don't have to quite put that burden on the city controller's office yet. But yeah, let's move. I think
Chair Jamalian, can I just speak to this really quickly, because I do appreciate Member Hallinan's comments and yours, and I do think there's this larger enforcement issue. And I can speak primarily from my union's experience in trucking and construction and solid waste and recycling, where some of those industries do have similar high barriers and costs associated with entry, but just as much are plagued by the underground economy and businesses coming in from outside San Francisco, and not complying with the same regulations that local businesses have to comply with. And where we see this of particular interest to our union is the fact that workers are not getting paid prevailing wages. and it undermines legitimate companies who are trying to do the right thing. So that latter point really hits home for us in the cannabis industry, just like it does in all of our other industries. And I would strongly recommend we have a conversation about enforcement, as you suggest, in the future to deal with the underground and black market economy. And that may involve discussions with people in the district attorney's office or the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement and their experience going after the black market or the underground economy in other industries in San Francisco outside of cannabis.
Yeah, I think, and it, if as long as it's civil and not criminal, and it's, comply or abate like what we kind of asked for, then yeah, that would make sense.
I agree. We don't want to be throwing people in jail.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I wanted to actually something when I was speaking there, it triggered something. I wanted to ask Ms. Lou a follow-up question. Are the costs that the city is, are the costs associated with setting up and operating this program, like to date and projected costs going forward, included in as a part of the report? And like the impact of the taxes on mitigating those costs, or how it fits together?
That wasn't part of our scoping, the cost side of it. We were mostly planning or looking at it from a tax question, a revenue question.
Okay, thank you.
Are the members open to start public comment?
Yes.
That
Let's take that as a yes. Thank you, Sarah. Can we open for public comment, Jeremy?
Certainly. At this time, public comment is open. There are two ways to submit public comment. Option 1, by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484709-5055 and press *3. Option 2, to submit public comment via the chat box on the WebEx platform. I do not see callers in the queue. Looking at the chat box, I do not see comments in the chat.
Thank you, Jeremy. That concludes our public comment section. Nothing to really vote on, so I just wanted to thank Ms. Lou for coming here today and listening to us and also giving us a presentation that was really helpful. I'll be reaching out to your office again, and hopefully we can work together on making sure the data is as complete as possible and actually reflects operations and costs of living in the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that brings us to agenda item number 6. This is kind of our heavy hitter for today. Nikesh has a lot to say. So, and we get to meet some of the new staff members. To Member Hallinan's point, I think after the OOC presentation, we can probably dive into a few of the subcategories that popped up already. So with that being said, I'll pass this on to Director Patel. Nikesh, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Chair Jamalian. And I think much to everyone's satisfaction, I will not actually be talking very much during this presentation. The rest of my team will, which is in part why we're so excited to roll out this presentation and give everyone a sense of what we've been up to for the last 6-7 months. A large part of that has been adding team members and growing this team and onboarding team members with the information they need to be able to hit the ground running. So a lot of what we've been doing has been towards that end, and I will be able to speak to that in a moment. But before we get started, Jeremy, if you could go ahead and pass the ball to Scott. Scott can go ahead and share the presentation and lead us through it. Okay, thanks so much. Members, can everyone see the screen that Scott is sharing?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. All right, next slide. Today's agenda will essentially cover these big bucket items. And as Chair Jamalian mentioned, some of these have already been addressed by the committee members in the previous item. So we can touch on that. We're happy to take questions. But I think some of the information that you'll hear will be helpful, at least as providing some context to some of the topics that have already been discussed. I cannot say how excited I am to give everyone the opportunity to meet the new team that has joined the Office of Cannabis. We have a handful of new faces, some that you have seen for the last 8 months, some that are much newer, and I can also speak to a little bit about some of the new members that will be joining. So we're very excited around the way that the team is coming together, and you will have an opportunity to hear from all of them momentarily. After that, we'll go into reviewing our permitting work, and you'll see that there have been some significant gains there as well. Then we'll talk about grants, technical assistance opportunities, both existing and new opportunities that we've been working on. And then I'll speak a little bit about some of the relationships we've been working on and what to expect moving forward as well. One of the topics that came up previously was around enforcement, and you'll also hear on that. And then we'll talk briefly about events. There have been a handful already this year, with Grasslands being the most recent. It was very successful, and we've only heard really positive things, especially from the equity vendors who were participating. So you'll hear more about that in a moment. And then what you will also hear about is the permit center, the new processes that are in place. And we're really excited to invite and have members of the permit center, so the permit center itself, DBI, planning, the sort of collaboration that really is going on, and give them an opportunity to speak to everyone here, as well as anyone who may be interested in submitting an application or is in the process around what that will look like. Can't emphasize, we're very excited about the new relationships that are forming and the access to information that it'll provide for our applicants. So I will go into it very briefly, and then you'll actually hear a presentation as the next agenda item from representatives from the Permit Center. With that, next slide, and I'll pass it over to one of our newest team members. Tanisha, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tanisha Gooch. I'm the Associate Director of Enforcement here at the Office of Cannabis. I've had the opportunity of meeting some of you, whether through events or through inspections. I was born and raised in San Francisco, graduated from UC Hastings, and spent 6 years as an assistant district attorney here in the city. I've been with the office since January. I'm really excited about my role here at the Office of Cannabis. Similar to my role at the district attorney's office, my goal has always been to bridge the gap between law enforcement and regulation in marginalized communities, because I am from the Bayview, Hunters Point area in San Francisco. So that's something that's very important to me, as well as social equity, but also safe consumption and public safety are things that are probably my number one priority. So here at the OOC, I've had the opportunity to work in the enforcement space and compliance by doing inspections, as well as permitting events and compliance in those areas. Next slide.
And Tanisha, thanks so much for that introduction. You will all be hearing from Tanisha a little bit more when we get to the enforcement section and events section of today's presentation. Before the next three members introduce themselves, I just want to provide a little bit of context. These are our three new permit analysts. We are very excited to have them on board. As you will hear from them, they come from different backgrounds. They're all very eager to be in this space, and they will be carrying the lion's share of getting through our permitting queue. So if you hear from any one of these individuals, work with them. They are here to help you, and they are very excited to be here. They've been spending the last several weeks training, learning the process, and have already started engaging with actual applications. So very excited. You'll hear more from Tanisha in a moment. I'm going to turn it over to Evelyn. Evelyn, if you could introduce yourself and just sort of speak to who you are, why you like this work, what brought you to the Office of Cannabis, what you're sort of working on in a general capacity right now. That would be great. But really use it as an opportunity to introduce yourself and let people get a sense of who you are. So Evelyn, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nikesh. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I see Member Hallinan. I've already engaged with you via email. Nice to meet you officially. I see Ines in the call-in list. This is who I am. So whenever you shooting me an email, it's me. So I am a child of the West Coast. I was born in Mexico in a state named Nayarit, which is like the West Coast. And then I grew up in Long Beach before settling here in Oakland. Academically, I have a degree from San Francisco State in anthropology and a public administration master's from Cal State East Bay. So a lot of my academic work was spent working with people and trying to understand complex systems. I very much enjoy troubleshooting and helping others. Work-wise, I work with the Justice and Diversity Center of the Bar Association of San Francisco as a bilingual client advocate for a short bit. Expanding a lot of the services to people who were facing eviction cases through the Housing Negotiation Project. So if you're an attorney, if you ever did any pro bono work for the Housing Negotiation Project, I probably worked with you. And then I also worked for the Alameda County Superior Court in self-help services, mostly family law, but there was like a wide breadth of legal services that we provided. I'm very excited to be here with you. I'm very excited to join this community of groundbreaking things that are happening. And, you know, who wouldn't want to be part of this team making a huge difference nationwide and actually globally? This is quite the place to be. So it's a pleasure. If you have any questions, shoot me an email.
Thanks,
Evelyn. Hey everyone, my name's Michael Mimer. Nice to see some familiar faces and meet some new people as well. I'm originally from the Bay Area, from San Carlos, but I've been living in Southern California for the last 8 years, so it's really nice to come back home. Down there, I had worked in sort of community engagement, trying to engage high school students in more volunteerism. And then more recently completed my Master of Public Policy at USC with focus on criminal justice and drug policy. And that's really spurred my interest in the OOC. It's a really interesting space to be in, both as an emerging market that is making the transition from illicit to licit, as well as the equity program, which is, I think quite groundbreaking and hopefully, if we can get this right, can be a model for other localities across the country. It's been about 7 weeks and I'm really enjoying the work so far and looking forward to working with more applicants. Thanks so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Dennis. I am running the presentation right now, so I can't see any of you, but it is lovely to meet all of you. I'm originally from the East Coast. I was born and raised in New Jersey. I went to college in Washington, D.C., and I've spent the largest portion of the last 7 years working on the campaign trail and electoral politics for Democratic candidates up and down the East Coast. I am also an administrative permit analyst, so I won't bore you by, reiterating all the work that Michael and Evelyn and myself will be completing on the job, but needless to say, I think we're all very excited about it. I was very interested in joining the OOC and working in this space because this is a space that sits at the nexus of a lot of really important social dynamics, conversations, movements, you could say. And I'm very interested in how cannabis, connects all of those disparate elements. We have the medical element, we have the business element, we have the transition from traditional markets to legal markets, the criminal justice element. There's just so many aspects at play. So it's a really exciting space to work in if you're interested in social justice and social equity. I'm just very happy to be here, very happy to be out on the West Coast. Both of my parents are originally from the West Coast, so it's a bit of a return for me more than something necessarily new. But as I've mentioned a few times, I'm just very excited to be here and happy to be involved. And I believe I'm passing it to Jeremy to introduce Princess.
Thank you, Scott. Jeremy Schwartz, Deputy Director, Office of Cannabis, introducing Ms. Princess Bustos, who is unable to join us today. We're elated to onboard all of these new colleagues. Princess lives in the Bay Area. A lot of you may have interacted with her in the past. She previously administered the Bar Association of San Francisco's Lawyer Referral Information Service, spearheaded by our partners with the Cannabis Law Committee. We're excited that she will be brought over to the city to better support our applicants. A lot of this effort, a nod to Director Patel, the city, and our state partners for enabling us to grow the team so that we could better support our community.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Scott, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. Before we continue, just a quick note. Princess will be joining the office early next month, so if you have not heard from her yet, do not worry. She will be joining us in about a month's time. So we are very excited to have her join. We're very excited to welcome our 3 new permanent analysts, and we're very excited that Tanisha has continued to do the work that she started and is really paving in the office. So this is the new team for now. We have every interest in continuing to grow, which I will speak to a little bit more at the end of this presentation about what we have to look forward to. But what I will ask of everyone here, especially everyone who's listening and will have the privilege of working with these folks, are just work with them. They are learning the processes. They are very smart and learning very quickly. But as all of you know, we are in a very complicated space that is constantly evolving, and any latitude you show them will only help increase their learning curve and be really of service to you and the city and this program, which really can be a model for the rest of the country. That's something we are all committed to in the Office of Cannabis, and we're very excited that the team is growing the way it is and the way that it will continue to grow. So I will stop there, and I'll pivot now to Yulia, Associate Director, who oversees our permitting process. I turn it over to you, to Yulia. Yulia, please let everyone know what we've been doing for the past 6 or so months on the permitting front. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Nikesh, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. So the little happy graph that you can hopefully see on your screens represents that the permit processing speed, our permit processing speed, has dramatically increased in the last 3 years. As you can see, since January 2021 to today, we doubled not only the total number of equity permits going from 14 to 28, but also our rate of application approval. Also, the total number of permits that were issued in the past 6 months is almost the same that the total amount of permits issued in the whole last year. So onward and upward. Next slide, please. All right, so permitting pipeline overview for this year. So there are a total of 45 operating equity permits to date, 28 of which are permanent permits and 17 are amnesty program permits. There are about 29 applicants that are at various stages of their build out process. They're finishing construction, scheduling inspections, and we currently have a handful of permits that are getting ready to be issued. With regard to the application processing, in the coming weeks, every equity application received to date will be assigned or processed by an equity analyst. So next slide, please. All right, so temporary permits renewal process. So I will highlight some things about the amnesty program really quick. So in 2018, amnesty program was a way for operators to transition from illicit market to regulated market by registering with the Office of Cannabis. This program has now been closed, but as a result, there are about 117 temporary permits that are currently are renewed on 120-day cycles. Out of the 117, as you can see on the screen, I'm sure there are 37 distribution permits, 36 cultivation permits, 25 manufacturing, 17 delivery. We have 1 nursery and 1 testing lab. And then this graph here is a percentage representation of the numbers that I just outlined. So this is just a brief overview of the permitting state of affairs to date. And with that, I will pass the ball to my colleague, Jeremy Schwartz.
And Jeremy, before you continue, just one other note with on the permitting front, it's not only, as Associate Director Yulia Skonzarova mentioned, it's not only that we are approaching the total number of permits we issued in 2021 at this point in the year, but it's that we anticipate eclipsing that in the next couple of weeks. So the permitting work is really paying dividends. It is speeding up. And what we would encourage all of you to do is if you have an active application, work with the permit analysts because they will be working very closely with you. And we anticipate that these applications will move even more quickly if that communication channel is continuing to go strong. Especially as they get onboarded, we anticipate that their response timelines will grow even faster. So with that, I turn it back over to Jeremy.
Thank you all. And next slide, please. The Cannabis Grant Program is to support equity applicants with their startup and ongoing costs to open and operate a commercial cannabis business. Eligibility criteria informed by this very body, the Cannabis Oversight Committee. The slide in front of us delineates between each iteration of grant cycles. We can see iteration 1, 7 figures of grant funds dispersed to a sizable number of equity businesses, awards ranging as you see in front of you. Iteration 2 is the current cycle that we're administering, about a $2 million award through the end of October. And as folks know, we also secured another award from our partners at GoBiz at the state level for a sizable award to be administered in 2023. We're delighted to report that our initial grant sources of funds, the Bradford grant and GoBiz grant, had a 100% utilization rate, which is pretty remarkable. It's not uncommon for utilization rates to be below that. As far as the current iteration, nearly $1 million has been dispersed. How much grantees are able to spend down their awards will inform eligibility for subsequent grant efforts between the state and the city and county of San Francisco. To date, 16 of 31 grantees have spent down or nearly spent down their award in the last month. There are 3 months remaining, and we're actively processing additional funding requests. As part of iteration 3, that sizable award you see on the right, eligibility criteria will be informed by a future agenda in front of the COC. More to come. Next slide, please.
And Jeremy, actually, Scott, if you could go back one slide, if you could just speak to the importance of the funding being spent down by the end of October in the current iteration, just so this committee understands and anyone who's watching understands how important it is that there's a certain target that we have to hit and that it happens, and what happens if that isn't the case. So if you could just provide a little bit more information, I think it would be very helpful for everyone here.
Yeah, thank you, Director Patel. Zooming in order to be eligible for the GoBiz 4 cycle, the iteration after next year, so for 2024, we must, between the community, the OC, must hit an 80% utilization rate in order to apply for the subsequent award. That deadline will be through this October of 2022. Depending on how that goes, will inform whether we can apply for the subsequent award, which does not impact grants to be available for 2023. There may be questions, happy to answer that, but from a high level and zooming into nuts and bolts, those are important considerations to be aware of. Next slide, please. Through a survey conducted by the Office of Cannabis in February of this year, we found that our flexible grant program has served diverse communities in the Bay Area. We can see the breakdown here. We had a very strong response rate in the 60 odd or so eligible grantees previously. Over 40 responded to our survey with demographic information broken down here. This was a voluntary survey, and we're ecstatic to see that response rate and always encourage our community to be responsive to surveys like this to inform the program moving forward. Next slide, please. We can see a majority of our respondents come from the BIPOC community. Interestingly, we do see a disproportionate of grantees being male over female. which is really interesting when thinking about parity in the space, opportunities to bring new equity applicants in. All to say, these are a part of our survey findings, and we hope that you find this helpful. Next slide, please. In addition to demographic information, we also surveyed our grantees to see how the program is running. We found that grantees agreed that the Office of Cannabis was highly responsive during this grant cycle. In addition to supplemental resources through our technical assistance providers, we can see further down below, we've also seen nearly 100% of our grantees found the grant program to be satisfactory in varying degrees. Through our community outreach and communication channels, we've made an effort to highlight the availability of technical assistance to further support our community. We found that nearly all of our grantees knew that technical assistance is available. Of that, about 40% leverage that free technical assistance to better support them through not only permitting, but grant opportunities, among other areas such as compliance or pro bono legal support. Next slide, please. I believe I'll be also addressing our technical assistance programs. Thank you, Scott. Next slide, please. There are several technical assistance opportunities that are available for verified equity applicants and new partnerships as well to support those that seek to get verified. The slide in front of us is a law office contracted by the Office of Economic Workforce Development, a nod to our city partners for supporting not only our program, but the community. If you're a verified equity applicant, you're welcome to navigate to our website. Akurapa is an associate attorney in the law office of Matthew Kuman. They have a new point of contact. If it is helpful to get additional free support for your project, you're more than welcome to contact this office to benefit from free technical assistance. Next slide, please. We're also happy that the pro bono technical assistance support remains ongoing. This has been spearheaded by a partnership between the city and the Bar Association of San Francisco's Cannabis Law Committee, comprised of many local attorneys, subject matter experts in this space. For those who are interested in leveraging this resource, you're welcome to log into the website and connect with the LRIS program, Lawyer Referral Information Service. It's typical that pro bono services may be 5, 10, up to 15 hours of pro bono support, depending on which attorney you're referred to. Next slide, please. We're also happy to announce that our partnership with the Golden Gate University Cannabis Law Clinic has strengthened, a big nod to Professor Alejandro Rodriguez with GGU, a student for sensible drug policy alum as well. For those who are interested in support through this clinic, you're welcome to contact Professor Rodriguez directly. And different from our other technical assistance programs, you do not need to be a verified equity applicant to leverage this resource. If you seek to become a verified equity applicant and need support gathering your documents to demonstrate that you meet 3 of 6 equity conditions, GGU is amenable, supportive, and very excited about helping not only those who are verified, but those seeking to get verified as well. And with that, Associate Director Gooch will be speaking to enforcement.
Thank you, Jeremy. So now we're going to talk about enforcement. So here, these numbers represent in green how many enforcement actions we were able to close out in 2021. And in blue, you will see how many enforcement actions we were able to close out in 2022, represented in the chart on the left. And as you can see, we've more than doubled the number of enforcement actions that we were able to investigate and close out. Also on the right, you will see the compliance inspections. In 2021, we were able to conduct 16 compliance inspections, whereas this year we were able to conduct 34 compliance inspections at our permitted locations.
And Tanisha, before we move to the next slide, can you just differentiate for folks here and anyone who's watching the difference between an enforcement action and a compliance inspection?
Yes, thank you. An enforcement action is when our office receives, by way of differing resources, receives information about unregulated activity in the city. And so our office, once we receive this information, we take steps to identify whether or not there is unregulated activity occurring. And so that can result in a number of things. One, it could just be nothing. It could just be a complaint from a neighbor. Or it could rise to the level of us issuing a notice of violation and a cease operations notice. And so these numbers include complaints that have come in this year as well as previous years. The 39 actions that we were able to close out so far in 2022. Compliance inspections are inspections that we conduct on our permitted cannabis businesses to ensure that they are in compliance with Article 16 of the Police Code. And so that's where you see me coming to do an inspection and asking people to update the surveillance cameras on their premises diagrams. Once they, add new cameras, which we love because we love for the premises to be as secure as possible. Just remember to make, markings on the premises diagram and submit it to our office so that when we come and do inspections, we know where to find these things. But if not, we will have a friendly reminder reminding you to do this, as you all know. And so this year I've been able to go to 34 inspections. And so I've been able to meet a lot of people who are operating, who are very lovely. And I always enjoy just getting to know everyone while I'm doing these inspections. Next slide. So in 2021, we received 31 complaints of unregulated activity. And this year we've received 33. And we were able to close out 17 in 2021, and this year we were able to close out 44 complaints. And those complaints includes complaints from this year as well as rollover complaints from 2021 and maybe even 2020. And so as you see, we were able to focus this year more on enforcement. This, is somewhat of a challenge because we have to have the manpower to go out and conduct all of these inspections, but we are prioritizing these things in the office as much as possible. And so here the numbers show our efforts in doing that. And, we still have the fall and the winter time to close out more complaints and follow up on compliance inspections. Next slide. And so also, we have been happy to say that this year we've permitted 3 events. We are very proud that these events have been successful. These events, so we basically want to tell you a little bit about the process. So events that are currently eligible for our temporary permitting program include previously held events that had cannabis sales that were unregulated in the past. You should apply for local authorization 90 days prior to the date of the event. 60 days, the application goes to the state so that you can get a state permit. And then 30 days before the event, you would apply to our office for a local permit. You are going to need the local authorization letter when you apply for your state permit. And so part of the reason why we have these timelines is because we always go to assess whether or not the premises will be viable for cannabis sales and consumption. Primarily whether or not these activities will be visible to the public, and whether or not the premises will allow for there to be limited visibility, amongst other things. And so we just had outside lands. We permitted the cannabis garden at Carnival, and then we had 420 earlier this year.
And Tanisha, before we move to the permit center, I think one thing that's really worth emphasizing with events, anyone who has been involved in seeking a permit from our office or working with other city departments to obtain a permit for cannabis sales and consumption knows that this is a very involved process. It's one that involves a lot of the event organizers' time. It involves a lot of the different city departments working together. Our office often works as a point of contact. There are numerous meetings, numerous walkthroughs. It's a pretty technical undertaking, and what the office, and Tanisha in particular, makes look easy takes months and months and months. And it's one of these things that is very much on our radar, that as we consider what the future of events in San Francisco look like, that will have some component of a cannabis sale or consumption, that it requires a lot of staffing. I've certainly talked to some of you about this, but it's no hidden fact that it requires a lot of time. And what we are really trying to assess right now is what that looks like as we decide what are going to be our staffing requests. But one of the things that I wanted Tanisha to be able to speak to, which she has, is that it's a longer process. It's typically reserved for much larger events right now. And if you are going to go through it, we would highly recommend that you talk to another event organizer that has gone through it, because they can speak to you about just how involved it is, how much organization is required, how much cross collaboration and communication with other city departments and other event organizers in the space is required. So just want to flag that for everyone. It's definitely on our radar. We understand how time consuming it is, but we hope that everyone else does as well. And with all that being said, we're very proud to have permitted at least 3 of these events, and there are a few more that are on the horizon. So we expect this number to grow before the year wraps. But if you have any questions, we definitely urge you to reach out and ask the questions before you have your sight set on pursuing one of these permits, because it is very involved, it's expensive, and it's not for the faint of heart. So I'll let you sort of discover that for yourself as you talk to anyone who's been through the process. But we're very proud of these events. And Outside Lands and Grasslands, it was an iteration, it was a building upon what happened last year. It got better. There were suggestions that were taken from last year's event that I think made the experience for equity vendors even better this time around. So we're happy to speak to a little bit more about that, but just wanted to speak about it for a first time, because it's not something that we've really discussed in the past. Okay, Tanisha, anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
No, thank you, Director Patel, for reminding folks that it is time consuming, but I didn't want to remind everyone that it is time consuming. But so far, it has been great working with everyone. We're learning a lot from the temporary cannabis events pilot program. And so it's just nice to see everyone's efforts and also the commitment to equity.
Well said. So I won't go too much into the permit center, because there is another agenda item in which representatives from the permit center will speak to what the experience will look like now versus what it may have looked like over the last couple of years. But I did want to frame the conversation for when they do present. And what I specifically wanted to focus on is, as many of you know, or anyone who's engaged with our office, you know that there's a part of this process that starts with the Office of Cannabis, and then there's the end part that wraps with the Office of Cannabis. But in between, there is a lot of working with other city departments. And with the construction of the permit center and a lot of the really good work that's happening there with the permit center, folks from DBI, folks from planning, the presence that's actually there on the second floor to try and make this process even easier for folks, it is a remarkable undertaking. It is one that I believe is getting stronger and will continue to get stronger. And when you hear from some of the folks who are working in this space to make the experience better, we hope that you will not only sort of hear that enthusiasm and that positive direction that this is heading in, but also take stock of who these individuals are, because they are here to help, and there are a lot more resources than may have been available in the past. So I will let them speak to this. But what I wanted to frame for everyone here is that the Office of Cannabis is working very closely with the Permit Center. It's a relationship that's developing, and we hope will only continue to get stronger. We believe it will get stronger as more of our applicants begin engaging with the Permit Center as well. So it'll be iterative, but this is something that we're prioritizing and really hoping can standardize the process for folks who are going through OC Part 1 and then working with other city departments. So more to come on that. I will wrap us in a moment. Scott, if you could go to the next slide. Great. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to flag for folks what is coming next. And there are a handful of different buckets that I can speak to. One of those is permitting. And as a way of projecting how we might be able to move through the queue moving forward, each of the permit analysts that you spoke with earlier, they will be assigned approximately 15 to 20 applications. And over time, the goal is that those applications will be their applications from start to finish. As anyone who's engaged with our office knows, that hasn't always been the case because we haven't had the luxury to assign an application to one person and have them see it from the very beginning all the way to the very end. But that is something we're moving towards for a variety of reasons, but one of those being for consistency's sake. Sometimes we know that when information is being passed from one person to another, it can cause delays. And that's something that we certainly want to cut down on because we think we can, especially with the dedicated permit analysts doing this work now. So that's one improvement that is in the works. It will get better with time, and that's why we urge all of you to work very closely with the permit analysts. But that's an exciting development, and it's one that we're investing a lot of time and energy into getting right. So that's something to look forward to. Another piece is that we are continuing to think through how can we create alternative pathways for verified equity applicants who've either submitted an application or are considering doing so. We recognize that the process is long and that it's important to provide people with other ways of being involved in the cannabis space or business ownership more generally. And that's a priority for the office in terms of identifying what that looks like. We will be engaging with the community once we can prioritize it a little bit more, but it's certainly on our radar. One of the other items on the permitting front that I think is important is that we will be picking up applications submitted by members of the existing industry. That will happen as soon as we finalize picking up this application submitted by equity applicants. We expect that to happen in the next couple of weeks, and we're very excited to begin working closely with members of the existing industry and begin the process of conversion from temporary permits or MCD permits into more permanent permits. So that is forthcoming as well, and it's a pretty big milestone in the office. Another area to focus on in terms of what's next is staffing. As of now, we are a team of 7. By September, we will be a team of 8. In the months after that, the goal is to get to 9, and by the end of the year or early next year, the hope is to be actually at 11 staffed positions. That is going to be another milestone for the office. The office has never been that large, but we are excited to be moving in that direction. And what it means for everyone here is that there will be dedicated staff for permitting. There will be more staff for enforcement. As you heard, we are limited on that front right now, but part of the new hiring framework is to relieve some of the pressure that Tanisha faces in terms of responding to enforcement complaints and inspections and provide some help there. So that is forthcoming. As many of you know, my old position, the person who will be running the Cannabis Oversight Committee meetings in terms of facilitating and helping, that's another priority for us. And we believe that that person will be able to help with events as well. So these changes are coming. We are ambitious, and we do believe that we will be an office of 11 closer to the end of the year or early next year. But as many of you may know, hiring processes are challenging right now. They can take time, and we are actively working towards that goal, but it's something we're very excited about. Another area that we're looking forward to building out is on the technical assistance side. As Deputy Director Schwartz mentioned, we have strengthened existing relationships, and we are proactively looking at other city partnerships that we can lean into to provide technical resources, particularly through Part 1 and potentially financial resources. But we're in the process of exploring, and there'll be more to come as we make headway there. So keep an eye out for that. On the event side, as I mentioned, there are more events that will likely be permitted, or at least are in the process of identifying if they can be permitted. And that's something we're very much aware of and are trying to plan for moving forward. On the grants, in the grants arena, as many of you know, and Deputy Director Schwartz mentioned, it's imperative that the funding that is currently available to eligible recipients is spent down, because it will dictate the funding that is available, not next year, but the year after that. We are thinking very much ahead and trying to secure funding for not next year, but the year after that. And we believe that we're in a good position to be able to speak to that, but it will take some time, and it will take everyone leaning in and making sure that the funds are spent down. Outside of that, there's a general focus on really identifying a way to take what we're doing here in the cannabis space and start laying groundwork for potentially expanding that into not the non-cannabis space. That is very much looking way down the line, but it's something that's on our radar. I've spoken with many of you about that and how important it is to use what we're doing here in the cannabis space and think about how it might inform similar models in other spaces, and how our verified equity applicants, the people who have really bought into this program, can potentially benefit from that nexus whenever it happens. So that is not a short-term goal. It's not something we anticipate happening immediately, but it is very much something we're working towards. And I think it's important that you hear that from us, that even if it may not seem that way in the short term, it's always on our minds. And I was reminded of how important it is to express that when I was speaking with one of the members on this committee in a separate context. So that's enough from me for now. I'm sure there will be questions. I think that's a wrap for our presentation for now, apart from a general service announcement for anyone who is going through the permitting process. So I will wrap us here. If you have submitted an application or you are working with our office, please, please, please make sure that your contact information is accurate. That's important for a variety of reasons, but the most important one is so we can get a hold of you if we need something that's pressing. Sometimes delays end up happening because we don't have the correct information or it's changed, and there's just been delays as a result of that. So really, really, really take it upon yourself to contact our office and make sure that the information that you either know we have or that you believe we may have is up to date. Another piece of important news is that the OOC has extended the virtual community outreach regulation. That was a move that we made during the pandemic to ensure that people were not being delayed in having these meetings because they previously had to happen in person. We have extended that in the same vein to make the process more efficient and to also create a record of it, which has become very important in instances where an application has delayed, and it's been important to be able to look back and say, well, this actually did happen. So that was an intentional move. We will reconsider whether what the merits are of extending it at a later point in time, but for now, it has been extended. Before I wrap, if there are any other comments from any of the team members that are helpful for our community, our members here, please feel free to share them before we give it back to Chair Jamalian for questions. Anyone have anything else to add? Okay, with that, Chair Jamalian, that concludes our presentation, and we will send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Nikesh. That was very, very helpful. Before we move on and open the floor for discussion, could somebody text Sean Richards the actual WebEx link on his phone? He just contacted me, then he could get on as well. But with that being said, I would like to open the floor to my fellow committee members. I think we all took some notes and probably want to engage with the new staff. So floor is open. Please go ahead and make your comment, ask your
Chair
question.
Jamalian, before we move to that, just as a housekeeping item, to make sure Sean gets the information, Sarah, would you mind messaging Sean the link that I provided you for panelists? And if you don't have his number, feel free to text me and I can provide it. Sorry, Chair Jamalian, just want to make sure that we address that first.
Thank you. Absolutely.
I'm happy to chime in.
Go for it.
That was great. Thank you, everyone. And really nice to virtually meet everybody. Really impressive. I love the enthusiasm of the new permit analyst team, and as well as Tanisha. And everyone was just it sounds like they have great diverse backgrounds and a lot of relevant background in social justice and to support I think I can't remember who said it, but all the different facets of this complex system we have here for cannabis. there was a lot to cover there, and I have a bunch of different notes. And so I'm kind of just going to pick one and focus in on it a little bit. And I was, Tanisha, I wanted to ask a couple of follow-up clarification questions about enforcement, just because this is an issue that I've been, it's been on my mind for a while, and I was really happy to see the statistics that you put up and the effectiveness and how things are ramping up. I was wondering, when you mentioned like when you're actually doing the enforcement, I was wondering if you can, maybe I missed it a little bit because you covered a lot of territory, but you had mentioned you were issuing cease and desist notices, I think. Can you just kind of go back over how the enforcement against I'm talking about the enforcement actions category, how the Office of Cannabis is handling enforcement, and what other city agencies or departments you guys are working with, and if that's been successful so far.
Thank you. So we are working with other city partners and other partners to see where there could be resources to build out our enforcement and compliance team, as well as shortening the time at which we can go out to investigate these enforcement actions. We do not generally disclose like our internal process of like how we do these investigations and etc. But per our code, we when we go out to issue the notice of violation and the cease and desist, basically, we have to go out with the San Francisco Police Department in order to do so. And so that is one city partner that we are dependent on to make these arrangements. Also, as you can imagine, sometimes these things can be a little complex. For instance, someone may be growing in their home, but maybe they have the legal amount of plants that can be grown in the home. Maybe the house does smell like cannabis, but maybe someone smokes every night in their garage, right? And so we do receive a wide variety of complaints. And so we just have to like go through them based on the time that we got them and kind of like the urgency.
Do you prioritize by like suspected commercial activity versus a home grower? I feel like going after a guy with a few lights in his basement might not be the best use of resources. How many of these were commercial scale violations?
So we don't get a lot of like warehouse complaints at our office. And as you can imagine, sometimes we have to do a visual inspection before we know what it actually is, based on the information that was provided by the person who notified our office, right? It can be a very detailed complaint, or it could be a vague response. And a lot of times these are anonymous complaints. And so our ability to follow up with them may be limited in that respect.
Thanks, Tanisha. That explains it.
Is the Office of Cannabis is actually issuing the cease and desist notices or the notices of violation, alleged notices of violation?
Yes, and sometimes we do get reports that someone is engaging in commercial activity without a permit, and so that's something that we would prioritize. But we don't get those in a respect of like cultivation. But sometimes we do get like unregulated, unlicensed retailers, and so those are ones that we do try to prioritize for obvious reasons.
It wasn't one of them, that church over on downtown. I think they stopped operating. Is that one of the enforcement cases that was handled by you guys?
This was a little prior to me joining the office, but there were reports that we received about that location. They did close short of us issuing a notice of violation.
No.
And members of the committee, there's a fine line we have to walk here with not disclosing too much about the investigations and actions that we've taken. So if it seems as if we're not sharing details, that's really where that's coming from. We suspect that these types of things will continue. And so the more we share about them, the more it gives people an opportunity to sort of adapt. So we will be a little bit vague, but I think Tanisha is hitting on a lot of really important points here about how complex this is. And I think the other piece that's worth adding that adds to the complexity is that even if you work with other city departments, and we are doing that, we work with planning, we work with the city attorney's office, we're beginning to anyway. We work with the police department, but what's really important, in Department of Public Health as well, but what's really important to keep in mind is when a complaint comes in, it's often not as comprehensive as we might need it to be able to identify what the actual issue is. Oftentimes, as Tanisha mentioned, it's anonymous, so there isn't an opportunity to follow up on it. Depending on what the nature of the claim is, there may be an inspection that's conducted. Oftentimes there is, but what's important to keep in mind is that each of these different departments have bounds of what they can and cannot do. And in terms of our authority, it is fairly limited. So for instance, if we were to respond to a complaint around odor, you can go to the vicinity, smell around, and see if it's confirmed. If it's not, then it might limit the further action we can take. We can certainly contact other city departments and elevate it, but again, this depends on the information that's provided. If the initial information that's provided is weak, then there may not be enough to take further action. So these cases, despite our efforts, they can be very challenging to pursue because each department has its own role. Depending on the amount of information that is provided, it could trigger that involvement. And then depending on what we can ascertain when we do the inspection, it also drives who else can be involved. So if you have limited authority for a particular context and you can't gather more information, then that complaint may stop there, right? And I think that's just important context. One of the things that we know is, at least to Chair Jamalian's point around the difference in the type of illicit operation, when it comes to warehouses, you need access to information that might signal that there's behavior there that is running afoul of the law. And that's not something we necessarily have the jurisdiction to go after, but other departments might. But then it comes down to a matter of prioritization, and that's something we're still trying to better understand. But this is all to say that, one, it's complex. Two, there's different levels of authority that each department has. Three, it requires a good amount of collaboration. And then that really comes back to the information that's being provided in the first instance. And if you can't follow up, then that makes it a little bit difficult, especially if the complaint is anonymous. And then there's the piece of operators, illicit or not, sophisticated. And if they sense that there's an investigation, then they can quickly pivot. And that has certainly happened where we are conducting an investigation, multiple city departments are involved, and the operator catches wind, pivots a little bit, and that delays us to be able to move forward, and then things can drag out, right? So just mainly providing all of that because we've really leaned into this year and we've learned a lot, and these are some of the lessons that we're learning. That doesn't mean that where we are today is where we will be in the next 6 months, but it does mean that there's challenges in this space, not only the ones you're identifying, but the ones that we've learned as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of my interest with this is, obviously I'm an attorney and I was involved in cannabis before it was legalized for adult use. And so I understood that how enforcement happened before, and it's a new kind of a brave new world of dealing with enforcement when it's not a felony anymore and there's search warrants and all kinds of stuff, dynamics at play. So that's why I'm really interested in this particular topic. And so is like 311, for example, referring cases to your office in some circumstances? Are they aware that you guys are the enforcement arm for cannabis complaints in the city now?
Yeah, and I'll let Tanisha sort of speak to the nuts and bolts if it's helpful, but we worked very hard, and at this time it was during the pandemic. I believe it was Associate Director Iskin Sarava who worked very closely with 311 to create a filtration system. So that is a filter for complaints. We do receive complaints there. And Tanisha, I'm happy to let you speak a little bit more about that if it's helpful, but the short answer is yes.
Yes, we do have a 311 platform that is also integrated with our website where we receive complaints and we're able to shift through them. Yulia from our office works with emergency management to kind of tailor it to our office's needs. And since I've been with the office, I've been managing that site. And so that's where we get varying complaints, and we're able to follow up on those things. And so basically, to Director Patel's point, right now we are looking to see what our resources are, and based on all of the challenges that he identified, we're learning a lot, and we're going to try to pivot so that we can be effective in the space in that way, because we do recognize that it does affect the community.
That's great. Okay, well, I had one other question for you while I got you here, Ms. Gooch. You had said this is on a jumping over the temporary permitting presentation. I just wanted to clarify one thing, because you had said apply 90 days prior to the event, apply to the state 60 days, and apply local 30 days. So the 90-day application would be, I just want to clarify, what would the 90-day application or recommendation be for which type of application?
So the 90-day requirement is to reach out to our office so that you can seek local authorization. And so basically that's where you would be telling us what the event is, what date it is, number of attendees, and so that we can verify whether or not that particular event would be eligible under the guidelines of it being a historically held event with previous cannabis sales that were unregulated. And then you would use that local authorization letter while you apply for the state's 60-day application.
Got it. Thank you.
And it's worth noting that you can see all of this on our website, and it makes very clear what those approved events are. I believe there's about 8 of them.
Can I
Well, now that you guys are staffing up, hopefully we can have more.
First, I would like to commend the Office of Cannabis, especially Tanisha, on getting us through the event application, because we did that for Carnival and it was very, very intensive and extensive, and super grateful for the patients, and also just like working with us till the very last minute. So I just want to openly commend you for your work, Tanisha, so that it's recorded that we do appreciate it. Also, I just wanted to flag and question, is there going to be a new process to being able to add new events to the list? Because I know that there are some areas of the city, for instance, like Soma, the Filipino district, that doesn't have an opportunity to participate in the event license. So just wondering what that process will be like and how we can participate.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Member Parks. And I think the answer there is yes. When that's going to be the case, we're not sure. And what the form looks like, we're not sure. What I mean by that is that will likely be through legislative intervention. And one of the things before we can get to that point is being able to show that we have learned enough from the existing body of approved events to be able to go back and rethink what the permitting framework for these events could look like. So the short answer is yes, but in terms of when that happens, it'll be dependent on which pathway it takes. That's part of it. The case that can be made for it, and then also staffing. I've spoken to a handful of members here about this. One of the big pieces that we're very, very sensitive to is if the legislation opens up to more events before the Office of Cannabis is in a position to be able to permit those events, then there could be a backlog, right? And I think you, from personal experience, know that if you don't have the attention of an analyst to help, it's not going to happen, right? So that's one of those things where the timing is going to be really important. We certainly are learning from the equity program as a whole, and we don't want to put the cart before the horse and have this expansive list of events that can be permitted, but not have the staff to support people to actually get through them. And then it ends up being a waste of their time and resources. So the short answer is yes, but I think it may take a little bit of time before we can get there.
With that being said, Nina, I'm going to reach out to you as well, because I agree we need to at least have events in every part of town, and those 7 just don't fit that bill. And so I'll reach out to you. We do have to push this forward, even if it has to go a little quicker than the OSC likes.
Nikesh, do you anticipate that your office will be issuing legislative recommendations for that?
It's unlikely at this point in time, and the reason for that is because the budget for the upcoming year has just been settled in June. So for us to be able to make the staffing requests that we anticipate we'll need to support the interests in cannabis events, we wouldn't be able to make those until the next budget cycle, which would be about 10 months from now. So again, we're heeding the lessons we've learned from the permitting process and the interest that there was in cannabis business permits, and trying not to create a situation again where the demand overwhelms the actual ability to process those applications. So I hear everything that's being said here. Chair Jamali, and I want to note that it's not a matter of want, it's trying to be responsible. And if we could do exactly what we wanted, then we would want to create more opportunities for events to be permitted. It's just we want to be very mindful that we're not shortchanging people or getting their hopes up, having them invest a lot of time, energy, or selling them a dream that is possible but may take a very long time. So it's really in that spirit that we're trying to be measured about this.
No, I understand. I think one way to do a measured approach is to maybe just expand this pilot program to add maybe 6 smaller scale events to it and see if the permitting of a smaller scale event, like a private event for 50 to 100 people, could be done with much less resources. But Nina and I will connect, and I'm sure we can put our brains together to come up with something that also works for the OOC and your bandwidth. We obviously have no interest in overloading you guys and slowing down people's permits and such.
I love the word measured. Thank you for repeating that.
Definitely, we are all learning from capacity issues. So I agree that we shouldn't, like you said, put the cart before the horse, because then we're bottlenecked into things that we're paying for that doesn't end up seeing any fruition, and it's just like operational capital being burned. That being said, I would like to flag for the Office of Cannabis, as well as for all of the other oversight committee members, that in regards to the state grants, there is no opportunity for somebody like myself that has an equity permit for event licenses to get any of the state grant money from the city at all. So there's no financial assistance for individuals that want to do events that are part of the equity program, because it's only all of those resources, including fees being waived at department levels, are only available to people with brick and mortars. So when you consider giving more legislative recommendations, and also to be able to use these state grants that are coming down for the equity program, to think about some issuance for every license type, just to make sure that there's resources there.
One quick question, Nina, just to clarify, but you do get to use your equity fee waiver on a state level for a event organizer license. You're referring that there's no fee waiver for a local fee that is associated with staging your event?
Okay.
Yes,
we get like the events permit. There is equity money at the state level for the fee waivers. Also, the definitions at the state level are different for people that get fee waivers at the state level. But here in the city, that has not been true, just because I just went through it. So there was a whole bunch of unexpected costs that I thought that I would be able to utilize some fee waivers on the city level, but there were none. So and then also, again, just like the brick and mortars were able to get grants to be able to subsidize their business or be able to invest into their business, there is none of that for events. So I just want to make sure so that we're thinking about equity through every single license type, from events all the way through manufacturing, all the way through distribution, and brick and mortar retail, as well as delivery, that there is something along the way for any equity applicant that wants to do any of those as an opportunity.
got it. I think
And
the
I'm
only issue
sorry.
here was that the grants that were the grant eligibility criteria, I believe, was created before the CEO license was really defined by the states, right? Is that why? So for the next round, you're saying we should take that into consideration. Got it.
I'm sorry, and I just wanted to clarify, Nina, and not speaking for you, but I think you're also saying across all city departments, right? I think you're saying correct, but you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Correct. Yes, through every city department. Thank you.
But can I just theoretically, if we were not to, if a cannabis event organizer license was eligible for the next round of grants, right? Then that grant money could be used to come into compliance, which would also cover those fees. If maybe Yulia or Jeremy could correct me if I'm wrong.
And I'll jump in really quickly, and then Yulia and Jeremy, feel free to jump in. But I think one of the other factors to keep in play here is that very few, I'm actually not sure if there are any other jurisdictions in California that do event permitting. That may be incorrect, but I think that's true. And because that's the case, we are one of one. And
Oh, sorry, just Oakland. Just Oakland.
Oakland's also doing events.
It's the only other one, correct?
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Right. So there's two, but the general point I was trying to make is the way that we can disperse the grants, it's based on parameters from the state. And I think the sort of challenge here might be that if there are only two jurisdictions in the entire state that are doing events, then the eligibility criteria, there would be a little bit of a conversation there about expanding the eligibility criteria for a set of compliance needs that apply to a very, very small set of jurisdictions. So that's sort of a logistical factor that I think could have a bearing on this conversation, but Yulia and Jeremy certainly know better, so I'm happy to pivot to them as well.
I'm inclined to say there are many factors to weigh: eligible term, eligible expenses, grant agreement, that if this is a part of a future discussion item, we could better able look into it and provide a more informative response.
That makes sense. Thank you, Jeremy. Is there any other items that the committee members want to bring up with the OOC? Doug, please.
Thank you. I just want to say how happy I am to see the office staffing up and how much I appreciate this report. And in particular, to see that not only are we hiring people, but we are hiring people from the community. And just, I always like to remind people that our public budgets are value statements, and our public dollars are a great chance for us to create good jobs for people. So whether that's hiring folks from the community to work in the Office of Cannabis, or channeling state grants towards companies in the cannabis industry that are also creating good jobs, these are great opportunities. So thank you for the report.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, I think we can all echo that. I've had the pleasure to meet most of you already, so I can definitely echo that sentiment. All have very, very impressive pedigree, so we look forward to working with you guys on the committee, and I think I speak for most of the local operators as well. That being said, I'd like to open up for public comment now. Jeremy or Sarah, if you don't mind opening up for public comment.
Absolutely. At this time, public comment is open. There are two ways to submit public comment. Option 1, by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484-709-5055 and select *3. The other way to submit public comment is via the chat box. This is option 2 on the WebEx platform. And I will go look at whether there's anyone in the call log. Let's see here. I see we do have a caller. Caller, you're unmuted. Your 2 minutes of public comment begin now.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Damian Posey, affectionately known in the community as Uncle Damien. I am a verified equity advocate. I am a store owner. I want to send the deepest amount of congratulations to everyone that has been hired, that's been working. I want to thank Jeremy and Tanish, who've been working with me in the recent past on everything, just being supportive. The OOC, is doing your best. I appreciate you. I don't know if this is the exact segment where I need to be bringing this up, but you guys spoke on so many different things, and I'm loving to hear it. But I want to bring to the table that every applicant like myself need permit amendments to be allowed to see a portion of our equity, and we need that now because we hurting out here. It's serious. There's a few of us. I know this might not be the time, but I definitely want to get a meeting with someone. I appreciate you guys. I just want to put this on the docket officially. I know it's not easy. You guys working through the pandemic, a lot of changes and everything. I want to shout out Nina and Sean, who've been doing great work. Halanan, all of these guys, man, been supportive around me. I was born and raised in San Francisco, the Bayview. Caught my first cannabis case when I was 11. I was actually locked up for it. Now I'm have the opportunity to benefit off of it, but not just me. Everybody knows what I'm doing in the community. I got the key to the city for the stuff that I'm doing in the community with the young people, and I need the support and these resources so that I can help, my nonprofits and other organizations, doing what we do in the community. So if we can get that on calendar, we can get a meeting, I would definitely be grateful, man, because, a lot of opportunities are disappearing. Investors are running out of money, and cannabis companies are going out of business.
Seconds.
So we need to get on top of this ASAP. So I appreciate you guys. Keep up the hard work. Thank you for this committee. Hopefully I'll be on this committee one day. And I'm sure that's my time. But definitely let's get on the calendar some type of way. I'll definitely email and reach out.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you,
We
Damien.
have an additional comment in the chat box. I will read that now, starting the 2-minute clock. My name is Raina Jackson, and my experience of the grants program and the overall permit process has been negative and demoralizing. During grant redistribution, I had viable expenses like marketing research unfairly denied and was only able to draw down a fraction of my eligible amount as a sole proprietor as the clock ran out. I physically picked up a 5-figure advancement funds check on Wednesday, 2/23, which the OOC expected to be clear and spent by Monday, 2/28, with no grace period. After communicating that the Bank of America non-cashier's check would take additional time to clear, I received no response nor willingness to provide an extension. Instead, the OOC is demanding the return of these funds with additional punitive actions and has denied my permit application, leaving me paying rent on my lease for no good reason. My dilemma is a result of slow, passive-aggressive responses from the OOC and a lack of willingness to collaborate and problem solve. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
We have an additional comment by Raina, and I suppose there are 30 seconds left on her comment. Positive survey results only capture the small percentage of us who have become permitted and or received grant funds, and ignores the majority who have not been so successful despite being savvy entrepreneurs following the rules. Clocking myself at 2 minutes here. Thank you for your comment. I will check whether we have an additional call. I do not see that. Checking the chat box for additional comments. I do not see additional comments. Public comment is now closed.
Thank you, Jeremy. That concludes agenda point number 6. If everyone's okay with a 10-minute break so we don't run too late, I would suggest we take a 10-minute break and then hear from the permit center next. Thank you. We'll see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, welcome back. We are now moving on to agenda item number 7, engaging with the permit center. We have a representative of the Permit Center here. Gus is going to be so kind and give us a little overview of what the new Permit Center looks like, how to navigate it, and hopefully we'll also get some of the questions from our last meeting answered. But there'll be time for the committee to engage after Gus's presentation. And with that, the floor is yours, Gus. Thank you for being here today.
Gus, you are now unmuted.
Okay, great. Thank you. Apologize for the technical difficulties there. Thanks for bearing with me. Thank you to the committee and the CASH for inviting us to talk to you about the San Francisco Permit Center. My name is Gustavo Bojorquez, but you can call me Gus. I'm the manager for the San Francisco Permit Center. I'm also joined by a couple of Permit Center partners. Jimmy Chung is on the line. He's the over-the-counter manager with the Department of Building Inspection. And also Michael Christensen, who's a principal planner with the San Francisco Planning. So if you can put up the deck, that would be great.
Gus, thanks so much for being here, and we're working through it right now, so it should be up in just a moment. But thank you for being here.
Definitely. Okay, great. So the next slide, please. Okay, so there was some information here. The Permit Center is located at 49 South Van Ness Avenue. We're on the second floor in San Francisco. We're on the corner of Mission and South Van Ness. So it's where the old Goodwill used to be, a processing center. It was brought down and two new buildings were in place, a residential tower as well as the 16th floor city building, which houses the Permit Center on the second floor. The San Francisco Permit Center is open from Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. If you please note that we close at 9 a.m. on Wednesdays. If you go to our webpage, which we have listed there, you'll find current department wait times, which are updated by the minute throughout the day. That way, you as a customer can decide if it's a good time to visit the Permit Center for permit plan review and potentially avoiding long waits. We also recommend that you arrive in the morning for shorter waits. Usually the wait times start to increase at about 10 a.m. And we open at 7:30, so it's great if you can come in earlier to get your permitting process. Next slide, please. So the end-to-end permitting journey includes visits to many San Francisco departments. Before the Permit Center, customers were potentially forced to see or visit as many as 12 plus different locations throughout the city to get a permit. But now with the San Francisco Permit Center, it provides a centralized location for construction, business, and special events permitting. The Permit Center project initially began as a real estate project, and the goal was to really consolidate all the locations and the leases and moving the departments closer together. Next slide, please. But now, after the apartments have settled in to the physical space, the focus of our work is shifting from establishing a stable in-person service to centralizing permitting process and to streamline the permit experience for the customer. Permit Center stakeholders from Department of Building Inspection, SF Planning, Public Works, Public Health, PUC, Fire Department, we're all coming together to focus on future work. And there's a big desire with all the departments and commitment to take on the initiatives that create more transparency in the permitting process, while also improving the permitting productivity and then really customer-centric, positive customer experiences in the permitting environment and center. Next slide, please. So here's a list of the departments that are currently operating in the Permit Center, as well as the services that are provided. So as I mentioned, the Permit Center department, we have our team here to provide customer support while you're visiting. There's the Department of Building Inspection, SF Planning, Fire, Public Works, PUC, Public Health, Environmental Health. They do plan review and also environmental health services, licensing. The Office of Small Business, which really excited, they came on board a few months ago, and they're providing assistance to small businesses through the permitting process. Entertainment Commission is also here, the Recs and Park. And then we've opened up a print center. And the print center is great because they will scan, they will copy, provide prints to not only like street and sidewalk permits, but also in case you have plan sets that need to be copied or improved on, they can help with that. In the future, and really in the next couple of weeks, we'll also be offering a notary service. Of course, all of these are with fees, but I can tell you that the cost, it's definitely a lot less expensive than going to like some of the print businesses and notary businesses in the area. There's, of course, construction permitting, business permitting, special events permitting, cashiering services. We're working on consolidating payments so that there's one location for you to make payments for services and permits and licenses throughout the city. And as well as I mentioned, we have a help desk located to assist you when you are on site. Next slide, please. So here's the queuing experience, or the experience when you're visiting the permit center. Customers will arrive to 49 South Van Ness. So the entrance is on the South Van Ness side. We have an 11th Street entrance, but currently it's closed for, it's an employee entrance for employees only. So we ask that customers come through the 49 South Van Ness doors. You'll be greeted by permit center customer service staff. Once you're greeted, the customers will either be directed to the DBI information counter for if you're here for a new permit construction on the first floor, or then you'll be directed to the second floor, which is the permit center, to see if you're here to see a specific department. Again, as I mentioned, we have customer service help desk located on the first and second floor to help answer your questions while you're on site. The permit center uses a queue management system called QList to manage the customer's journey throughout the center. The way it works is the customers will be entered into QList using your mobile phone number. So when we ask you for your mobile phone number, you'll then receive and are entered into the queue. You'll automatically receive a text message with instructions of when and where to report for the department that you're here to see when it's your turn to see them. We also have monitors throughout the floor, large screen monitors throughout the floor in the event that you do not have your mobile device. QList communicates to you through text messaging, as I mentioned. It's a two-way text messaging, so in the event that you're being summoned to a counter, let's say a DBI counter for assistance, and you're not ready, you can easily reply with M to request more time. What's also great is in the event that you decide to leave the center and leave the line, you can reply with L to leave the line, and you're done with your business in the permit center. Throughout your journey, you're routed from department through department through QList, and you'll receive text messages with updates while you're in that, in the process of getting your permit. Next slide, please. So again, this is why we have a queuing system. The floor plan is a 39,000 square foot space. We have about 70 plus public counters, 12 plus departments providing service every day. There's a lot of space for customers to wait and work. However, as I mentioned, the advantage of having QList is that you receive status updates through mobile text and can request more time if you're not ready. So you're definitely free to leave the building while you're waiting in line. You're not tethered to a TV screen or monitor while you're in line. So at this point now, since we've gave an overview of what the space looks like and some of the services that are provided, I'd now like to bring on Jimmy Chung, who will talk to you about the DBI services in the permit center. Jimmy?
Hi, this is Jimmy Chung, and I'm the over-the-counter manager at the Department of Building Inspection. Since I'm the over-the-counter manager, I have to be here 5 days a week, so no working from home. Next slide, please. And so DBI's mission is to protect building and life safety for citizens, workers, and visitors of San Francisco. And we provide these services to over 200,000 commercial residential buildings and residential buildings. Next slide. So some of the stuff we do include review and issue permits, We conduct inspections, that's building inspections, plumbing inspections, mechanical and electrical inspections. We also do housing inspections to make sure the housing stock is maintained appropriately. We also enforce the building code and housing codes to make sure it's up to code. And lastly, we investigate complaints from the members of the public. Next slide. So last year, we reviewed 79,000 permits. We performed 119,000 inspections, and we pulled up 19,000 public records for members of the public. Next slide. So there are two types of permits, building permits that there are two types of ways we review building permits. One is over the counter and one is in-house. Over the counter is for jobs that are smaller in scope, basic renovations, additions, tenant improvements, re-roofing, water heater installation. And for larger projects like new buildings or major renovations to a residential or commercial building, we need a little bit more time to review the submitted package. Next slide. So this is a flow chart of the permit process for over the counter. A lot of it is probably Gus's work, with the queue list system you can see. But first thing the applicant needs to do is determine if they need plans or not. And after their design professional produces the plans, then they'll take a look at it and see if it falls under over the counter or not. If it falls under over the counter, they'll come to the permit center and they'll get routed through the queue list system to go see all the applicable departments. And once that permit's issued, once that permit application is approved, it's issued, and they can begin construction. They'll do intermediate inspections every now and then. And then at the end of the day, they'll get a final inspection and a certificate of occupancy for some projects. Next slide. Okay, so getting your cannabis permits. There are three types. We see mostly these three types. One is like the cultivation and extraction. One is the dispensing facilities, medicinal and recreational. And the third one is nurseries. A complete application is generally over the counter. Plans are required. I would say if you hired a experienced design professional, you'll get the best results. So these are different. These are the different departments your cannabis permit will go to. Each department reviews the particular aspect of the entire job with some overlap. For example, the fire department and the building department has some overlap, and probably the mechanical department and fire department has some overlap also. So that's the end of my presentation. Michael Christensen is next at the planning department.
Hello, Michael Christensen, principal planner with the planning department, but on loan to the San Francisco Permit Center. Next slide. Great. So today I am really just going to focus on what services the planning department provides at the public counters at the Permit Center. So we have our public counters, which we call the PIC, down at the Permit Center. And those stations are available for review and approval of any permit that we can approve over the counter. I want to just make a distinction that what planning can approve over the counter and what building can approve over the counter may be slightly different. In terms of what type of application form you need, you should follow what process the building department can process it as. If planning reviews it and we need to do something, but it can be processed OTC, we will try to keep you OTC. But for the planning department, we can approve a permit at the counter in person if you do not need an entitlement. So if you're not in the purple zone or anything where you need a conditional use authorization or any other application specifically filed with the planning department, or if you've already obtained it and you've taken care of that prior to coming to the permit center. And also if we can conduct our review under the California Environmental Quality Act at the counter, or if it has also already been done. And then also if you have a project that is requires neighborhood notice if that is not required. Those counters are also available to provide consultation on zoning, historic preservation, and CEQA. We do recommend for cannabis applicants to send your questions to a specific email box, cpc.cannabis@sfgov.org, if you'd like some feedback there. But if you do want to just sit and talk with a planner, maybe you have a particular site with some preservation issues and you want to talk out those issues, we do have staff available at the permit center that can talk to you.
Great. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Michael. So the next few slides are some frequently asked questions. And then Jimmy and Michael ask if you want to add anything on these topics, please feel free to jump in. Some of the most frequently asked questions is, how do I start a building permit? Really, it's, as Jimmy mentioned, it's either going to be an over-the-counter or in-house project. If it's an over-the-counter project, I've listed a couple links, SF.gov site that can provide you a step-by-step process on how to apply for an over-the-counter permit, as well as the process to apply for an in-house permit. And again, in-house is a larger scope and size, new construction type projects. But if you have questions in regards to general permitting, here's some emails that you can contact. With regards to the permitting center, the permit center and general permitting questions, please feel free to email the permit center at sfgov.org. If you have specific building code and inspection specific questions, then it would be the DBI customer service at sfgov.org email. And then of course, if there's planning related to site use, cpc.cannabis. Next, what is the status on my application? We provided a link here to DBI's permit tracking system. It's really a great tool to use to find exactly where your permit is at any given time during review. So there's the link there. What you'll need though is your project application number. Once you put in your project application number, you'll see a bunch of information, including the location of the project, when it was received, what departments require review, and where it's at in the review. If you don't have the project application number, another good resource is the San Francisco Property Information Map, the PIM map with SF Planning. This way you can search for the permit application number by your project address. Again, here's the same 3 emails if you have questions. If it's really about over-the-counter permit questions, the permit center email. If it's more project status, processing times for either over-the-counter or in-house projects, then that's the DBI customer service email. And then again, for SF Planning current processing times, the cannabis email. I mean, on a side note, I know I'm giving you some 3 emails here, but we are working on, these are some of the initiatives that we're working on. And one of them is sort of centralizing customer inquiries through one email. And then once that inquiry is received, it would be assigned to the appropriate department for response. So again, these are some of the initiatives that we're working on to help streamline permitting and really improve the experience. Next slide. Who's reviewing my project? Again, this is the permit tracking system and the San Francisco Property Information Map. 2 great resources and links to maybe bookmark if you're getting a lot of permits or applying for a lot of building construction permits. Again, if you pull that up, you'll be able to see the department that's reviewing, as well as the plan reviewer that's assigned for the review. You are more than welcome. All the emails our emails are public, so you're more than welcome to contact the plan reviewer directly for status on your project. But if not, these are the 3 emails there on the bottom, thank you, that you are more than welcome to email for status. And then the last thing, and maybe, Michael, if you can jump in a little bit on planning, but also, or maybe Jimmy, to talk about what are the fees associated with my project. For planning, it's pretty cut and dry, but Michael, I'll leave it up to you to maybe add a little more to it. And there's the link for the information.
Sure. So the planning department, you may need to pay fees to the planning department if you have an entitlement application. And then we also levy fee on the application for building permit. In both cases, the cost of your review by the planning department is based on the valuation of the work. We do have PDF document where you can type in that valuation and it will tell you what our fee will be based on that valuation, which is linked there.
Awesome, thank you. And then for the San Francisco Department of Building Inspection permit application fees, Jim, you want to add anything to how those are calculated?
They're going to be the same as any other tenant improvement in San Francisco, commercial tenant improvement. That's about it.
Okay, and there's also, project scope and also the number of departments that are required in the review. But if you like some specifics on, or an estimate, you can contact the DBI customer service email, and someone will reply with some general information on fees. And that is it for the presentation. We're, with the permit center, there's a lot of great energy, a lot of great partnership with the departments. It's an open floor plan, which is brought all the departments together for a common goal, and that's improving the permitting process. But if you have questions or you have some feedback, especially if you visited the permit center and you have questions on or some suggestions on ways to improve, please feel free to submit those over to us at the permit center at sfgov.org. So again, that's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and I believe we were available to field questions.
Hi, thank you, Gus. Thank you to DBI and planning for being here. I was actually going to ask you to pull up a slide, if you don't mind. I saw there was a slide about over-the-counter permits and the percentage thereof, and it seemed like that number was a general number for all of the permits you process. I'm more interested in finding out of that 52 or 7% that you listed, how many of those were cannabis permits?
I think that's in the DBI slides.
Yes, it is under the DBI slide. Sorry.
One more. There. Or
one more.
No, I believe it's the next one after that. Yeah, 57% of OTC applications are approved. Then there was another slide where you list some cannabis activities that are OTC, and that was the one that actually confused me. So I'm assuming the 57 is all of building permits, correct?
Yes, yeah.
What percentage of that would you guess is cannabis?
I think we probably only see 0.5% of cannabis projects.
Yeah, I would think it's negligible as well.
Yeah,
Could you
yeah.
get to the next slide, please? That's the one I'd like a little clarification on. So types of cannabis businesses, we have cultivation, extraction, dispensing, and nurseries. Applications are generally over-the-counter permit. I think the industry can attest to not a single one of us was able to pull an over-the-counter permit. Could you explain this slide? Because it's very confusing.
So we try our best to do all of them over the counter. Sometimes the plans are not complete or the information is not there. And in order to get the counter to keep moving, because we got other customers in line also, we sometimes take a timeout and we take that project in, and then it gives us time to work to write all the corrections that needs to be done and ask and give it to the owner in one shot. It's only fair for the rest of the permit applicants that are not cannabis.
I understand that, but in our last meeting, and let me just pull up these notes here. I believe in our last meeting, we were told by Mr. Buckley that the issue is on the intake level, right? Because we don't have cannabis use traditionally identified in our codes. So every time a cannabis operator makes a request for an over-the-counter permit, because they're trying to change the use because cannabis use didn't exist before, doesn't that automatically become an in-house permit process then?
I would say for the more technical ones where they're using CO2s, those are probably the nurseries and facilities.
Sorry to interrupt you, but everything that you listed in here is more technical. Cultivation, extraction, nurseries, those are all very technical, right?
The medicinal recreational retail use is pretty simple, right?
So we have over-the-counter retailers that were able to pull a full over-the-counter permit for their retail
I've
goods?
worked with two, I believe. I guess I don't want to get into it too much because I contacted Nikesh about a month ago regarding two of them. But those were over the counters, and those are the ones I was reviewing personally. But I don't want to get into a specific project or anything like that.
Well, no, I understand, but our committee, we have to make sure that our community is informed correctly, right? And I think that every single cultivator, extractor, probably the majority of dispensaries and all nurseries have pulled an in-house permit. So maybe if we could get that
Maybe we could probably update that slide, I guess. But we try to do as much over the counter.
Well, I understand that you try, but I think part of the problem that our community has is that we do an intake process and then we think that it's going to move along within kind of the time frame of an over the counter. And then once it gets to your point, reviewed, maybe set aside because there's some issues with the mechanical or the, plumbing or whatever that might be. And then these slowdowns end up causing a log jam where people have to go back to their investors and ask for more money because, as you know, the larger projects also require quite a lot of rent, right? So having pulled two permits myself, I think that my experience really contradicts some of the things I saw here today. And we would really like to open the dialogue with you guys to do this a little bit more efficiently because it appears that a lot of us have been stuffed into categories that kind of applied. We were supposed to get some answers in this meeting regarding how many outstanding violations there were to require change to F1. We had some questions regarding occupancy. Unfortunately, fire is not here today. They were going to come back to us with some of the fire code issues that relate to the occupancy. So really appreciate this presentation. But I do have to take issue with these two slides.
Chairman Jamali, I guess I'm the over-the-counter manager, but I'm not the deputy director of both, over-the-counter and not over-the-counter. So I could just speak for over-the-counter. And this is my first time attending this committee, so I might not have all the answers you want. Sorry about that.
I appreciate you being here, and this is not an attack against you. It's just that this doesn't accurately reflect what our industry has to do at the permit center. And I just want to make sure that our community knows that good luck trying to get an over-the-counter cultivation or extraction permit that doesn't happen in the city.
I understand.
I mean, Commissioner, I'd just like to add too, I mean, these are a lot of the challenges that we're seeing, and that are now becoming or surfacing as we are all working together in the center. And we're also, building relationships. We met with Nikesh last month to bring up and discuss some of these challenges in your community. And so the good thing is, though, is that the communications or lines now have been established. And we can always, either, put a monthly or meeting with Nikesh and OOC to surface and discuss these situations and to work on improvements or to work on providing better communication. So, it's disheartening that you experienced some of this in the past. But again, the overall goal of the Permit Center is to improve these experiences with the customers. So that future businesses can flourish and grow and expand and bring more business in your industry. So definitely appreciate and apologize for some of the hardships that you and your fellow business owners have experienced. But we are open to improving and providing better communication for future in permitting.
I really appreciate you guys being here, and our purpose is to update your information so we can have more sensible ordinances and codes. And a lot of this will probably have to be addressed in legislation, which is, you're clearly an administrative office that's following codes and legislations. We're well aware of that. And that's what we're here for. We would like to have a more open and a more active dialogue with you by any means. So I'll reach out to you as well, Victor, and then as Gus, sorry about that. And we can discuss kind of the specifics that not just that this is across the board in our industry is experiencing.
Great. That sounds great, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. With that, I open the floor to the rest of the committee members. We'll probably try to wrap this up and start a public comment pretty soon. But that being said, any of my fellow committee members, please share your experiences, any questions you have with the representatives of planning, DBI, and the permit center.
Chairman Jamalian, do you mind if I provide an additional piece of historic context here?
Oh, thank you, Michael.
So I would agree from my experience seeing pretty much all of these permits coming through. I have not really seen a cultivation site that's qualified for OTC. DBI, if they can review a project in about less than an hour, they let it go OTC. If they think it will take longer than that, it is not eligible for OTC and it needs to be in-house. And cultivation and extraction, they tend to be fairly complex projects that require more than an hour of review. For retailers, we have recognized that historically there was an issue where a lot of projects that really could have been OTC were funneled into an intake process that wasn't the best route through the building department, but they ended up getting funneled through that route because they needed to be intaked by the planning department for something like neighborhood notice. And back at 1650, at the old permit center, if you came in and if the planning department needed to intake a permit, you were intake the whole way through. That is something that has changed when we moved to 49 South Van Ness, so it's only been a couple of years now, but one of the big focuses of the permit center and one of the really great things about the permit center is it has introduced a customer-focused mindset to these types of decisions and applied that to every department. So things like the planning department, we have changed our process where if you are coming in and you are eligible for over-the-counter for DBI, planning will try to keep you in that OTC process. So even if we need to take it in and do neighborhood notice for a retailer, we will do kind of a soft intake. And instead of having it be a full intake through DBI, in the DBI intake process, we'll just take possession of it at the counter, do what we need to do, and then give it back through permit center staff to try to keep you in that queue. So all in all, I mean, we have really recognized that historically it's been a problem where we have pushed projects that are fairly routine and should be processed OTC into an intake process because there's some requirement and they ended up in this realm that they weren't appropriate at. I will say in the last 2 years, we have introduced some changes to try to address that, and we are seeing much more of our retail permits that are coming through go through an OTC route. And that's what we're hoping to see for all of them.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. That's a really important explanation to add to this presentation. I appreciate it. That definitely puts things into context. And then now I even understand why an OTC for having planned facilities that manufacture and cultivate. Yeah, I can't even flip those pages in an hour, right? So how is somebody going to actually review it? That would have been great information. Thanks for adding that. Really appreciate it, Michael.
Yeah, this is Brendan. I just want to chime in. I think sorry. I think one of the things that we're trying to do, and I know what Ollie's getting at, Chair Jamalian's getting at, is that all the information that's being provided to the applicants, we just want to make sure that it's accurate, right? Because there's expectations, and most of the people, particularly the equity applicants, don't have a huge amount of funding, and it's a balancing act. And so, trying to go into a project with accurate timelines and information is really crucial. And so if it's intake, then it's intake, right? It's like, call it what it is, And I think there's been a little bit of and again, miscommunication or expectation set that a lot of these projects would go in or be eligible for OTC, but it seems like maybe because these are new uses that maybe some of the plan checkers are not familiar with, or because they involve changes of uses, occupancy changes, things like that, they might suddenly go, well, this is new, I got to set it aside for intake. And so if that's happening, 9 out of 10 times, there may be a place where there's an existing retail use that's already opening and all they're doing is making minor tenant improvements to the interior. And that, that's the one case that gets through over the counter, that's great. But I think if it's going to be, 9 out of 10, we should just set a realistic expectation. And I think that's kind of what we're getting at. It's not saying that you guys or any department is not doing their job or anything like that. It's more of trying to get an understanding. If there are things we can do to make that easier, we obviously want to pursue those, whether it's through more training of these types of uses with plant checkers. I know planning's obviously been through it a lot, but particularly with cultivation, manufacturing, I think probably there haven't been that many new use applications put through yet that have been, reviewed, compared to other uses in the city or historical uses that have existed for decades. I think that's just what we're trying to get at, is just trying to get this as accurate as it can. So when the information is conveyed to the applicants and they're conveying it toward their team and their investors, everyone has a really realistic idea of what the process is going to be like. So I just want to clarify that and again, kind of reiterate, if there's things we could do constructively to make these things eligible for OTC, we should really put resources into doing that.
Yeah, thanks for condensing that message to its essence, Member Hallinan. I appreciate it. Anybody else? Otherwise, I would open up for public comment.
I'd like to jump in here.
Please, Doug.
I want to thank my fellow members for your comments and also really thank the staff who came and gave this report. And at the expense of maybe upsetting some people, I will say that the cannabis industry is unlike any other that I've ever dealt with, but also the cannabis industry gets treatment unlike any other industry in the city and county of San Francisco. And because we're a very public-facing body here, and we have a lot of people coming from the employer community to our meetings, I do think it's important to remind everybody that this sort of hands-on treatment that the cannabis industry is getting and really unparalleled access to city staff is just important. And I understand the frustrations that everybody has navigating the permit system, but I do think it's important to step back and feel some gratitude that this sort of hands-on treatment is happening in this industry that doesn't happen really in any other. So thank you.
Thank you, Doug. I think we all know it and take that really seriously, right? I think to the point that Nikesh made, we are trying to create a model here. I think Michael has something to add to that as well.
I would like to add, because we didn't totally cover it in this. If you do end up having a permit that does require review as an in-house permit, we do strongly recommend that you take advantage of the electronic plan review process that we do have established. If you use a paper process, that single roll of plans is going to go to the first person, and they're going to take however long they need to take, and only after they're totally done will it go to the second person, and on and on. And you really only get it in front of one person at a time. Where if you do avail yourself of the electronic plan review function process, it gets to everybody at the same time. So we are seeing that it does cut off from the total processing time literally a few months. We do really want to encourage people to use that, and there is information via the link on how to apply for an in-house permit.
One question I have for that, in the new fancy print center, is there any way to get submissions that were in paper converted to electronic? Or is it, because I remember from the last meeting we were told whichever format you submit in, that's the one you're stuck with. So is there any plan to is there anything on the roadmap that might let you convert after submission? Or is that just, it's your choice, you stick with it?
Yeah, if I can jump in here. Good afternoon. I'm Neville Pereira, Deputy Director for Permit Services at Department of Building Inspection. We certainly want to encourage electronic plan review even at midstream projects. there is a request that happens and a little bit of an internal process, but we will certainly entertain those requests.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you, Neville. Thanks. Should we open up for public comment? Jeremy, do you mind?
Absolutely. I will toggle on those features. At this time, public comment is now open. There are two ways to submit public comment. Option 1 by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484-709-5055 and press *3. Option 2 is via the chat box on the WebEx platform. And a quick note that I gave the presentation feature, I believe, back to Sarah Farrell in case you want to put those instructions up. Going to see whether we have any callers. Gus, I'm going to put you back on mute. No callers. I do believe we have something on the chat box. Yes. So I will start reading with 2 minutes starting now. This comment, first, I want to clarify that I commend the groundbreaking work that OOC has achieved. I'm grateful for this opportunity and very happy for equity operators leading the way. Yet the OOC must acknowledge how it can improve to serve more people who also deserve to take advantage of this opportunity. One solution would be to work with the Board of Supervisors to enhance the incubation program, making it mandatory for general applicants like in Oakland. I commend the generous incubators who contribute to equity through its only optional. The outdated OOC incubator list still includes too many bogus incubators who are not vetted or non-responsive, or worse, just fishing for ideas to steal with no NDAs in place. Bottom line, too many of us have abandoned our applications or are on the brink and are left worse off financially when we started, which is tragic and unacceptable. I am not seeing, thank you for your comment. I am not seeing anyone else calling in. Going to check the chat box one more time. I do not see additional comments. Public comment is now closed.
Thank you, Jeremy. That concludes agenda item 7. So the only one left is general public comment. With that, we will go to public comment if there is any.
Thank you, Chair Jamalian. At this time, public comment is open. There are two ways to submit public comment. Option 1 by phone, dial 1-415-655-0001 and enter access code 2484-709-5055 and press *3. Option 2 is to enter your comment via the chat box. I will check whether there are any comments in the queue. I am not seeing them in the chat. I do see a potential caller, but it may be our former department member. To be on the safe side, I'm going to unmute to see if it is a public comment. Caller, you're unmuted in case you have a public comment.
Hi, this is Gus. It might be me.
Thank you, Gus. It is. I'll go ahead and unmute you or mute you. So it doesn't appear that our comment is now closed.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
staff. Thank you,
Happy
Ollie.
Wednesday.
Thank you.
Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you, everybody.